European Union leaders gather in Brussels to deal with the migrant crisis. Could this mean reprieve for asylum seekers or shutting the door to all migrants? We'll get some answers after this break. You are watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. The program is going to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. Let's move on to the ongoing EU summit. The bloc's leaders are gathering in Brussels. Talks about migrant policy are on the agenda, though EU leaders are deeply divided over what to do with legitimate asylum seekers. Meanwhile, the UK and other remaining EU members will look for a common ground to move Brexit onto the next stage. Well, were they? Let's take a look at this.
Calls for a coherent migrant policy. Despite the EU stepping up efforts to prevent arrivals and outsource migration responsibility to countries outside their borders, arrivals remain high. Growing anger over immigration is pressuring governments from Germany to Italy. Italy's new populist government is saying no more and has started to turn away ships carrying migrants. The bloc is discussing ways to tighten its borders at the two-day summit.
We need to decide without delay. We need to stop the illegal immigration. We need to work a lot with Libya. We need to invest money in Libya. And long term, we need to invest money in Africa. And then we need to start also the debate inside the European Council, the relocation of the refugees.
European Parliament members have long sought consensus on reforming the EU's common migration and asylum rules, but member states are always divided on the subject. Even tweaking so-called Dublin rules has come up again. The UK does not want to provide asylum, and a clear idea of the future of Brexit is up for discussion at the summit, with only 9 months left until the UK's departure. A French official said Britain and the EU should prepare for a no-deal Brexit scenario, despite recent progress in negotiations. But the bloc cannot seal a divorce treaty without agreement among all members. Ahead of the Brussels summit, UK Prime Minister Theresa May and European Union Council President Donald Tusk met to catch up on the Brexit talks so far.
We have been making good progress, but there is more that we want to do and need to do as we look ahead to our future trade and security partnership in the future.
Meanwhile, the British monarch has approved the first Brexit law. It gives Ms May's government the power to transfer thousands of pieces of European legislation into British law after Brexit. Trade union leaders and Britain's business leaders are joining forces at the pace of negotiations, since threats to jobs and investments inside the UK are increasing because of a looming hard Brexit. And EU leaders are expected to back retaliatory duties against the US during the summit.
For more on the EU summit, join us from Brussels, Peter Klepp, who is the head of the Brussels office of the Open Europe. In Southampton, we have Mike Bastian, who is a professor of the University of Southampton. Welcome, gentlemen, to both of you. If I could ask the very first question, that is whether this summit going to solve any problem. I mean, after all, the Europeans have been talking about this for a long, long time. Why should we have confidence about them having a solution this time? Professor Bastian? Or should we not?
It remains to be seen. Obviously, immigration will dominate. That will be the major issue. And the issue there really is the pressure, the huge pressure on Chancellor Merkel. She is really under pressure, primarily from our Interior Minister, Seehofer, to deliver some sort of solution, bring back some sort of solution to Europe-wide immigration that is acceptable to them. And his party, the CSU party, are threatening to actually pull down the coalition. So you'd hope there will be some concrete progress, but it remains to be seen, because there's hugely divisive opinion across member nations, Italy in particular.
If you look at what is going on around the world, Mr. Clapp, when it comes to immigration problems, migrants problems is always a big controversial topic, but I'm already having some fatigue talking about this topic because we do not have any new development in terms of seeking solutions and consensus. All these new players coming up and say, I'm for this, I'm against this, and yet eventually there's no consensus. Mr. Clapp, can you bring us anything new?
There is one thing that is new and that is potentially a game changer, and that is the idea that is being agreed now among European leaders to create centers for asylum seekers outside of the EU. So until now the problem was that when people were rescued at sea, that they would, after they had been fingerprinted, were allowed to continue their trip.
Yeah.
And this, of course, granted an incentive to people to risk their lives and cross the Mediterranean and pay a human smuggler. Now, if they would be brought after they've been rescued to some center outside of the EU, some safe place where they can await their asylum request, then people that would not have a chance to get asylum would likely no longer take the risk.
If you take a look at some of the data of migrants and refugees entering Europe over the years, let's take a look at some of these numbers. It shows that over the 33,000 migrants entered Europe from January to June this year. They mainly entered through Spain, Greece, and Italy. Since 2015, the EU has asked the other member states to accept the refugees currently stranded in those three countries. However, fewer than one-fifth of these refugees were resettled. Germany, France, Sweden took in the majority, but the Czech Republic, who only accepted 12 non-Muslim refugees. Well, there are other countries as well. It's not right to just single out one country, yet it shows us how difficult it is and how national interests is taking the priority. And therefore, Professor Baston, can you help us understand the relationship between, or rather the differences between the Europeans' migration problems and that is going on inside America? Is the logic similar or very different? Of course, you have a group that you have to agree on policies. Besides that, fundamentally, what is it?
I think there are differences and there are also similarities. Well, what's going on in Europe is this wave of populism and far-right or certainly right-wing governments, particularly in these Visegrad countries, obviously Hungary, Poland, and they really are vehemently opposed to taking any share of these migrants, and that leaves other countries exposed to this. And it's their electorate that's really driving this. If we come back to Germany, the far-right party there'll be elections in autumn, and the far-right party are eyeing further gains and a hold on power, and that really is undermining the coalition. So that there's a real feeling amongst, I think, the electorate, the people of Europe, and possibly America, that they're really, they've been abandoned. They're sort of economically being disadvantaged, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the political system, and I think that's really what's driving this, and it's going to take some strong leadership, particularly from Merkel and others, to actually sort this out. And frankly, other European countries have to take their share of economic migrants. But as your panelist from Brussels says, there is progress being made. There will be more investment in third countries, in African countries, to try to dissuade this and nip this problem in the bud, stop these migrants from taking to the seas. And the numbers are down, even though this is the dominant issue across European countries. And the European political system is really being determined by migrant policy or lack of migrant policy.
Yeah, despite of the efforts being made, even though you tell me it's great news, but these efforts, compared to the enormous amount of demands for better life and people's desire to be a safer place, is uncomparable. Could probably only be a drop of water in a big sea. So, now, Mr. Clapp, do you really see that things likely to change, where actually the Europeans are just coming up with an idea, say, okay, I give you the money, I give you some efforts, you guys handle it yourself within your own country, don't come to us. We're going to close our door, but we're going to close our door in a nice way, that we take care of you to a certain extent.
Well, Europe won't be closed, so actually the challenge is not so much to stop migration, but it is to control migration, to make sure that it happens in a legal way. At the moment, for example, the people who sneak into Europe in an illegal manner, they are mostly men. So one of the ideas is to indeed then scrutinize who can get asylum and who cannot get asylum. Now, indeed, there's big challenges because third countries will need to agree to host these centers. But even there may be a backup plan. Particularly France and Spain are considering to perhaps use Spanish territory in Africa, the enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla, if I have that right, to host these centers. So there are solutions, but this is very important. Even if the numbers are down, in the last 5 years around 2.5 million people have illegally entered the EU, and given the explosion of the population of Africa in the next few decades, we can expect more pressure on the external border.
Yes, Professor Bastian, I mean, if you look at those numbers, huge numbers, for any country it's very hard to absorb all of these, particularly illegal immigrants. But on the other hand, the European countries, especially the EU countries, have been talking about its values of having open door. It's also talking about its values of having a zone, the Schengen zone, for example, that is welcoming, that is opening to the outside world. So if there is not appropriate policies or only make-up policies be done among the European countries, will that value of so-called Schengen zone, the value of the EU, still stand at all?
I think it will. I think people will see sense. I think the Schengen zone, the Schengen area has proved a huge success. There needs to be more publicity about the success of this zone and the free movement, not just for tourism and travel, but also for the business community and industry and industrial growth. The European economy, I think, will gain momentum, will become stronger, and I think with that the people of Europe will realize the benefits of this liberal attitude of open borders and transparency. So I think things will change. It needs far more pressure and far more of an effort to stand up to the far right with a stronger argument. There's not as much passion on the centre-left side as there is on the far right side. I think that's what's missing.
Mr. Clapp, of course, if you look at the United States, there are enormous amount of debates. One is about the Supreme Court decision recently, and the other is about the separation of families on the border between Mexico and the United States. Both are big political issues for their midterm election. Having said that, though, what would be the result of their national debate and their eventually choice of this issue and having its impact on the Europeans' decision? Would there be any?
Well, of course, it's not entirely comparable, but indeed, the fact that you have this intense debate in the United States with President Trump taking a very particular stance is, of course, also having an influence on the European debates. I think people will perhaps be less shy to defend firm solutions for border protection. Now, I agree with the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, who has just said that if you don't take firm action, then people may be lured to supporting some crazy, dangerous far-right solutions. So we don't want that, of course. But if you allow chaos, for example, what Angela Merkel has done to suspend the Dublin rules, this has really boosted the far right in Europe, unfortunately.
Professor Bastian, do you agree with that?
I think by and large, I think Tusk is right to call for leaders to stand up and regain a sense of authority and take what might appear in the short term to be pretty unpopular decisions, and that really is necessary now. We need a pan-European solution to immigration. I think that is within reach, that is achievable, but it needs member states, member nations to actually stand up, be counted, and again take what appears to be unpopular decisions, but publicise the benefits in the long term, and those benefits are real, and there's a real danger of some sort of protectionist and far-right policies creeping into the debate more and more.
Professor Bastian, that's the biggest danger, isn't it? I mean, we look at the specific issues, the immigration issues included, but we look at them with the bigger background of what exactly is going on, what is going to be the logic of the international community for the near future. If you look at what's going on inside the United States, if you look at what's going on within the EU countries about the immigration issues, particularly you know, driving them apart from their earlier commitments, you wonder what exactly will be the future that we are going to commit to when we have to face. Professor Bastian and Mr. Klepp, very briefly from both of you. Professor Bastian, go first.
I'm optimistic. Surprisingly, I see the French offering optimism. I think Macron will push for tighter integration across the Eurozone, a Eurozone budget, and principles there, which are very, very positive. And I think many people will support those. So that's really very much anti-protectionist, and that's what we need to see. So the French coming forward.
Okay. And Mr. Klepp?
Well, with regards to the future of the EU, I don't think Macron's proposals are the right way forward. Concentrating power and money at the central level is indeed something that acts in a protectionist manner. I think it's also the quickest way to destroy support for the European project. With regards to immigration, as I said, I think Africa's population is going to double, triple in the next few decades. So the pressure on the border will continue. Even if Africa becomes wealthier, this actually makes it more likely that people are able to come to Europe. That's what we're seeing in practice anyway.
We're
so
running out of time. Thank you so much, Peter Klepp and Mike Bastian. Really appreciate it. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or try to find us on social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Sina Weibo. And from Yi Tianwei and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.